Imagine waking up in a village where your reputation is more fragile than your life. A place where a cough, a dying cow, or a neighbor's bad harvest can turn into a whispered accusation, and that whisper is enough to end you. In the early 1400s, witchcraft didn't yet mean pacts with Satan or midnight Sabbaths. It meant malefice, harm, someone falling ill, a child wasting away, a beer that wouldn't ferment. Misfortune without explanation almost always demanded a culprit, and that culprit was often the person the village trusted the least: the outsider, the healer, the widow, the woman who lived alone. Legally, you had almost no protection. In many regions, the mere hint of suspicion allowed authorities to drag you into interrogation, imprison you, or torture you, long before the infamous witch-hunting manuals of the late 15th century. Clergy, magistrates, and local lords held immense power, and ordinary people stood before them with no lawyer, no literacy, and no chance. All it took was a rumor, a grudge, a sick child, a frightened neighbor. In this world, truth didn't matter. Fear did. And once that fear pointed its finger at you, nothing, not innocence, not honesty, not prayer, could save you. This is the story of what really happened when someone in 1400 was accused of witchcraft. A system where superstition, desperation, and authority closed in like a noose. A world where accusation wasn't the beginning of a trial. It was the beginning of the end.
You don't need to cast a spell to be accused of witchcraft in 1400. You just need to be noticed. A strange look, an unlucky day, a neighbor who doesn't like you. That's enough. Accusations didn't come from dark forests or demonic rituals. They came from kitchens, fields, and marketplaces. A cow dies suddenly, someone must have cursed it. A child develops a fever, someone must have wished harm. A batch of beer spoils at the tavern. Clearly, someone meddled with bad magic. Court rolls from France, England, and the German states show the same pattern again and again. A conflict, a failed cure, a sick animal, a quarrel, and suddenly a name whispered as the cause. And the legal system accepted it. Witchcraft in 1400 wasn't yet tied to devil worship. The crime was malefice, causing harm through unknown means. If your neighbor said you muttered something under your breath before their child fell ill, that counted as evidence. If someone claimed you gave them herbs before their ailment got worse, that counted too. No lawyers stood beside the accused. No formal defense existed for illiterate peasants facing trained magistrates and clerics. Your words were weighed against the fears of your entire community, and the fear always won. Records from Switzerland and the Holy Roman Empire show women accused simply for practicing midwifery or offering herbal remedies. Others were targeted for being widows, foreigners, or living alone on the edge of a village. In a world without scientific explanations, rumor became fact, misfortune became malefice, and your fate depended not on truth, but on whether your neighbors felt safe or safer with you gone. Evidence didn't have to prove guilt, it only had to point at you.
Before we descend deeper, before the ropes tighten, before the questions turn into screams, let me take 10 seconds for something that won't break this story and won't cost you anything. Medieval people had no choices, but you do. If you've ever wished your internet connection could earn a little passive income while you sleep, Honeygain is one of the simplest ways to do it. You install it, let it run, and it quietly generates credits using only your unused internet traffic. No work, no effort, no interruptions. It's the exact opposite of the medieval world, a system that actually works for you. If you want to try it, the link is below, and you'll even get a bonus when you sign up. Now, let's go back to 1400, where choice ends and interrogation begins. You're dragged into a stone chamber that smells of sweat, mildew, and old fear. There is no judge here, no jury, only men with tools. In the early 1400s, torture wasn't chaos, it was procedure. Roman canon law, adopted across much of Europe after the 13th century, allowed judicial torture for serious crimes, and malefice, harmful magic, was considered serious enough. The methods were brutal but familiar to the records. The strappado, where your hands were bound behind your back and you were hoisted into the air until your shoulders began to tear. The thumb screws, crushing bone and flesh until confessions spilled out through tears. Sleep deprivation, where days blurred into hallucination and hopelessness, and bindings so tight they cut off circulation, turning your own limbs into instruments of pain. Most people confessed within hours. Everyone broke eventually. But the confession itself didn't matter. Not really. What mattered was confirming the fear the community already believed. And torture had another purpose – multiplication. Interrogators demanded names. Who worked with you? Who helped you? Who whispered spells with you in the night? Even if you had no one to name, pain forced you to invent someone. This is how accusations spread, not through evidence, but through suffering. Historical records from Germany, Savoy, and northern Italy show confession after confession extracted under torture decades before the infamous Malleus Maleficarum even existed. The machinery of fear was already running, powered by pain and fueled by suspicion. In this room, there is no innocence, only pressure, agony, and the truth they want, not the truth you lived.
When the torture chamber door finally opens, you don't feel relief, you feel dread. Because the next step isn't freedom, it's court. And medieval courts were not designed to find the truth, they were designed to confirm the accusation. In the early 1400s, witchcraft sat in a strange legal space. If the accusation was about malefice, spoiling ale, harming livestock, causing illness, it usually went to secular courts. If it even hinted at heresy, it slid into ecclesiastical courts. But the worst fate was when the two systems overlapped, trapping you between them like a stone in a mill. Local customs decided everything. In much of France and the Holy Roman Empire, municipal courts could act on rumor alone. Town councils, pressured by frightened neighbors, issued orders for imprisonment or execution without requiring anything resembling real evidence. The law didn't protect you, it protected the community from its own fear. And gender played its role. Men could be accused, yes, but women bore the greatest risk. Especially healers, midwives, widows without male protection, or women who simply didn't fit neatly into the expected mold. If you had knowledge, you were suspicious. If you had independence, you were dangerous. If you had neither, you were vulnerable. Court records from Basel, Freiburg, and other early 15th century cities show how easily accusations turned into death sentences. A woman accused of giving herbs to a sick child, a widow blamed for a dying cow, a healer punished for a cure that didn't work. Your fate didn't rest in the hands of justice, it rested in the hands of fear, interpreted by men who believed themselves instruments of God and guardians of public order. And once you entered this system, every path pointed downward. You couldn't argue, you couldn't prove your innocence, you couldn't escape the shadow cast by your own neighbors. In a world where faith shaped law and fear shaped faith, you were not judged on what you did. You were judged on what others felt.
Once the verdict is made, and it almost always is, the rest of your story becomes brutally predictable. You are no longer a member of the community. You are a threat that must be erased. Execution wasn't the beginning of your suffering. Your punishment began the moment you were accused. You'd be taken to a cell, not a dungeon of iron spikes and dramatic chains, but something far worse in its simplicity,
A dark room with no heat, no bedding, no sanitation. Rats gnawed at scraps. Disease thrived on damp walls. Prisoners weren't fed to stay alive, they were fed just enough to die slowly. Many accused witches never made it to execution. They died of starvation, fever, injuries from torture, or the simple collapse of the body after weeks in filth. But if you survived long enough for formal punishment, the options were grimly consistent. In much of Germany and the Holy Roman Empire, execution by fire was standard for crimes involving harmful magic. Flames were seen as purification, a cleansing of the community as much as a punishment of the accused. In many other regions, hanging was used, quicker but no less final. Before your death, your belongings, whatever you had, were often confiscated. Local authorities and creditors claimed property from the condemned, leaving families impoverished and socially tainted. Accusation wasn't just a sentence for you, it was a sentence for everyone connected to you. And the cruelty didn't end with the living. Some towns in 14th, 15th century France conducted post-mortem trials, dragging corpses to court for symbolic conviction. Even the dead could not escape the machinery of fear. Acquittal was possible, but rare, almost mythical. Without wealth, power, or a protector willing to challenge the court, your chances were nearly zero. Justice wasn't blind, it was pointed like a spear at the powerless. In 1400, the system wasn't designed to discover truth. It was designed to restore order through sacrifice. And once you were accused, that sacrifice was almost always you.
You wake up one last time, not to hope, but to acceptance. In this world, your innocence was never part of the equation. In the early 1400s, a witchcraft accusation wasn't a mystery to be solved or a case to be argued. It was a process, a machine already set in motion long before your name was spoken. A system where rumor replaced evidence, fear replaced reason, and confession was extracted by force rather than truth. Communities projected their terrors onto the vulnerable, a sick child, a failing crop, a dying animal. Someone had to be blamed, and you were convenient. The courts, whether secular or ecclesiastical, weren't institutions of justice. They were instruments of control. Their role was not to discover innocence, but to restore order by punishing whoever the village believed had, quote, disturbed it. And that belief was shaped by desperation, ignorance, and centuries of superstition. You didn't need to cast spells. You didn't need to believe in magic. You didn't need to be guilty of anything. You just needed a neighbor to point at you. In 1400, survival didn't depend on truth. It depended on status, protection, and luck, all things the accused rarely had. And that is the brutal reality. In a world ruled by fear, you had no chance, no matter who you were.